Welcome. You found 3 hours of feel-good stories to help you fall asleep. These are gentle, cozy stories. Nothing intense, nothing dramatic. Just warm moments, kind people, and happy endings. There's no need to stay fully awake. Let your mind wander. Let the stories fade in and out as you drift off. Get comfortable and rest easy, and enjoy these feel-good stories to fall asleep to. Justin sat in his car, alone, on the side of a long, empty highway, a sunburned stretch of road somewhere in the desert west. Heat shimmered on the asphalt. Wind moved dust across the shoulder like tiny rivers of sand, and nothing else moved at all. His tire was shredded, torn apart hours ago by something unseen. A sharp edge, a forgotten fragment of metal. It didn't matter anymore. He had waited, and waited, watching cars pass him by. Some slowed, most didn't. A few glanced his way and kept going. Busy lives, busy roads. No one stopped. And after enough time passes, you start to feel invisible. You start to wonder if help is ever coming. You wonder if kindness is a thing for other people, for other days. He sat there, alone with his thoughts, alone with the weight of a difficult year. Sometimes life piles things on in small, quiet ways. A little loneliness, a little loss, a little too much waiting, and then a sound. An engine slowing down, the crunch of tires on gravel. A tired old van pulling in behind him, not sleek and not shiny, but real. A family stepped out, a man, a woman, a little girl with dark hair and a cloth doll held close to her chest. They didn't speak much English, but there was no hesitation. The father knelt beside Justin's car. His hands worked with practiced patience. No rush, no complaint, just quiet care. The mother smiled at Justin, a tired smile, but kind. She disappeared into their van and returned with food, a tamale, wrapped in cloth, still warm. She offered it to him like it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. It was grace. The little girl stood close to her mother, wide-eyed, watching the world, watching Justin. When the work was done, when the tire was secure and the car safe again, Justin reached for his wallet. $20. A small thing, but it was something. An offering for their time, for their kindness. Por favor, he said. Please. The father shook his head, gently, firmly. He searched for the words. You could see him thinking, reaching across language, across distance, and then he pointed to Justin and to himself, and with quiet care he said, Today you, tomorrow me. 4 words, but they stayed with Justin like a stone in his pocket, like a light that wouldn't go out. The family climbed back into their van, old engine rumbling. The little girl waved, and then they were gone, dust trailing behind them, gone like so many others on that road, but not forgotten, not invisible. Justin sat for a long time, tamale in hand. He took a bite, warm, simple, made with care. And he wept, not from sadness, but from being seen, from being cared for without asking, from realizing how much he had needed that moment. Later, he shared this story online. Just words on a screen, an answer to a question about kindness. But the story didn't stay small. It moved. It spread. It found hearts that had also been waiting, also been stranded, also been invisible. It became one of Reddit's most beloved stories, a reminder passed quietly from stranger to stranger that the world is still good, that people still stop, that kindness is not gone. Today you, tomorrow me. It is not a transaction. It is not a favor to be repaid. It is how we carry one another, in moments small enough to miss, in moments quiet enough to heal. We help. We are helped. We belong to each other, even on long roads, even on hard days, even when no one else stops. Today you, tomorrow me. Always. Elmer Alvarez walked the streets of New Haven, Connecticut. The year was 2017, and Elmer had no home, no roof to return to, no door to close behind him. The streets were his world. Hard streets, cold streets, days blurred into nights, and nights blurred into days. But on one of those days, something caught his eye. A piece of paper on the ground, not trash, not forgotten mail. It was a check, a real check, written for $10,000. Enough money to change everything. Enough money to disappear, to start over, to vanish into another life. Elmer held it in his hands, and for a moment, he must have felt the weight of it. $10,000, a fortune when you have nothing. But Elmer didn't think like that. He didn't see an escape. He saw a name. Roberta Hosky, a real estate broker. Someone who had lost something important. Someone who deserved to get it back. And so Elmer began to search. No phone of his own. No office to work from. Just his determination and his integrity. He asked around. He made calls when he could, and somehow he found her. Roberta was stunned. People don't expect that kind of honesty, especially not from someone struggling to survive. But here was Elmer, quiet, humble, returning what wasn't his, not for reward, not for praise, but because it was the right thing to do. What Elmer didn't know was that Roberta had once been homeless too. She knew what it meant to sleep without a roof, to wake up without certainty, to carry hunger like a second skin. And now, face to face with Elmer, she saw herself, not in his poverty, but in his strength, in his honesty, in his heart. So she didn't just thank him. She didn't just shake his hand. She changed his life. She offered him a job at her real estate company. She paid for his housing. She enrolled him in real estate school, not as charity, but as belief. Belief that Elmer was worth investing in. Belief that people can rise, that people can rebuild, that one act of honesty can open every door. And it did. Elmer worked. He learned. He studied. He stepped into a future he hadn't dared to imagine. And he didn't forget where he came from. Neither did Roberta. Together, they created a program, a way to help others facing homelessness, a way to offer not just housing, but training, education, opportunity, a hand to hold, and a path to walk. There needs to be more people like Elmer, Roberta told CBS News. He had nothing, but his integrity is worth more than $10,000. And maybe that's true. Maybe integrity is the real currency of the world. It can't be lost. It can't be stolen. It grows the more you give it away. One honest choice, on an ordinary day, by a man with nothing to his name, changed not just his life, but countless others. Kindness moves like that. Quiet, unexpected, relentless. It starts in one heart and reaches another and another, until a city feels smaller, until a stranger feels like a neighbor, until no one is invisible. Elmer found a check, but more than that, he found a way forward, and he left the door open behind him, for others to follow, for others to hope, for others to come home. Airports hum with their own kind of loneliness, the quiet shuffling of feet, the low rumble of voices speaking into phones, people moving, always moving, between places, between lives. It was there, in the center of that restless, echoing space, that a father sat on the cold floor, beside his 3-year-old daughter. He was not traveling for work, not traveling for vacation. He was traveling because he had to, because life had become a before and an after, and they were living in the after. The little girl had not asked for this, nor had he, but grief had gathered around them like heavy fog. And now, in this crowded airport, surrounded by strangers, her small world collapsed. She cried, loudly, without apology. The kind of cry that comes from the center of a child's world, when they don't understand why everything feels wrong. He held her, whispered to her, rocked her back and forth. But his own heart was frayed, barely stitched together. His eyes burned with tears, from exhaustion, from sorrow, from the terrible aloneness of carrying too much in a place built for rushing feet and moving lines. And then, softly, they began to appear. Women, strangers, moving without hurry. One knelt close, her voice warm like sunlight, singing the old song. The itsy-bitsy spider climbed up the water spout. Another reached into her bag and offered a small, bright toy, a simple thing, but given with care. Someone else handed him a bottle of water, without words, And together, these strangers formed a small, quiet circle around a father and child who had fallen into a moment too big to carry alone. They did not ask questions. They did not demand stories. They simply stayed until the girl's sobs softened, stayed until her body grew still against her father's chest, stayed until she began slowly to laugh, not because everything was better, not because grief had gone, but because kindness had built a small shelter around them, right there on the hard, unfamiliar floor of the airport. One woman helped him stand. She met his eyes and said only, "We've been there. This is what people should do." And then, like leaves on the wind, they drifted away, back into the crowds, back into their own journeys, but not forgotten, never forgotten. Later the father would write about them, about that brief sacred moment when strangers became something else, not family, not friends, but human hands held out in a time of breaking, proof that even in sorrow, especially in sorrow, we are never as alone as we think. Somewhere, someone sees us, and sometimes, without asking, they sit beside us in our darkest hour. And that is a story worth carrying forever, a quiet story, but the truest kind there is. In a tall hospital building with quiet halls and tired eyes, there was a window, ordinary, except for one thing, a sign, a simple piece of paper taped to the glass from the inside. It did not ask for money. It did not ask for flowers. Just 4 quiet words. Send pizza. Room 4112. And behind that window, in room 4112, was a family learning to live moment by moment. A mother, a father, a small, brave girl, only 2 years old. She was not there by choice. She was there because illness had arrived like a storm, unexpected, uninvited, unrelenting. Cancer, a word too big for someone so small. The days blurred together. Machines, needles, whispers in the night. But still, they loved her fiercely. Still, they stayed, and in a small, tired moment, perhaps without planning, perhaps just for a smile, they wrote the sign, Send pizza. Room 4112. They did not know who might see it. They did not expect the world to answer. But someone walking by, a stranger, paused. They saw it. They took a picture. And quietly, they posted it online into the wide waiting space of the internet, a place filled with noise, but also, sometimes, and filled with hearts. Within hours, the first pizza arrived, then another, and another. Boxes stacked gently like gifts left on a doorstep. The hospital staff smiled. Room 4112 filled with the scent of melted cheese and warm bread, but also with something deeper, laughter, surprise, wonder. More pizzas came, dozens, so many that the hospital had to kindly ask for a pause. "Thank you," they wrote. "We have more than enough." But the message had already travelled, far beyond that window, far beyond those hospital walls. Messages poured in from strangers they would never meet. Prayers, hope, stories of survival. Words sent across the distance like hands outstretched. For one small girl and her family, held in the quiet glow of unexpected kindness. Her mother later wrote, "We have been absolutely humbled and surprised by the outpouring of love and support from the online community. We have received so many messages of hope and prayers. And for a while, for a brief, golden while, room 4112 was not just a hospital room. It was a place of joy, a place of connection, a reminder that sometimes the world answers. Sometimes strangers become a circle of comfort woven across miles, all because of 4 words scribbled in hope, placed on glass, seen by one person, shared by many. This is the quiet magic of being human. Not perfect, not polished, but willing, again and again, to show up for each other in unexpected ways, even if it's only a pizza at a hospital window, even if it's only a small act of saying, "You are not alone." It began, as these stories often do, with something small, an ordinary mistake, a wallet left behind, fallen quietly in the wide, empty space of a parking lot. He didn't notice at first, not until the errands were done, not until he patted his pocket and felt only air, that sinking feeling, that slow rise of frustration, cards to replace, IDs to order, cash lost forever. He told himself it was just a thing, just stuff, nothing more. And so he went home, already making a mental list of the calls he'd need to make, the steps he'd need to take to rebuild what had slipped away. But then, a knock at the door. Not loud, not hurried, just soft, waiting. He opened it, and there she was, a young woman he had never seen before. In her hand, his wallet, every card, every receipt, every small scrap of his life tucked neatly inside, even the cash, untouched. She smiled almost shyly. "I found it in the parking lot," she said. She had driven on her own time without expectation to return it to him. When he tried to offer her money, a reward for her trouble, she shook her head, softly, kindly. "No need," she said. "Just promise to do something nice for someone else someday." And then she was gone. No name left behind, only a simple request, a seed planted in quiet soil. And it grew, because kindness does. Days later, he found himself at a grocery store, buying gift cards, not for himself, but for strangers. for people whose names he did not know. He walked the city streets, offering them to those who needed them most. To the man sitting by the bus stop, to the woman with tired eyes outside the cafe. A small envelope, a quiet offering. When asked why, he answered simply, "Because someone was kind to me." And the story did not end there. Weeks passed, and one day he saw one of the men he had given a card to. This man smiled, not with surprise, but with warmth. "I used part of that card," the man said, "to buy a meal for someone else who was hungry." A chain, a ripple, a soft, widening circle of kindness. It had begun with a lost wallet, a small accident, a moment of honesty, but it had become something else, something lasting, something living, a reminder that goodness travels, that it moves beyond the first hand that gives or the first heart that receives. It moves because kindness is not meant to stay still. It is meant to move, to flow, to return to the world over and over, changed and growing and shining brighter each time it is passed along. A lost wallet, a knock at the door, a promise, and all the quiet, beautiful things that followed. This is how kindness works. Not loudly, not for show, but in small hands, on ordinary days, becoming something extraordinary because someone was kind and someone else noticed and someone else decided to be kind too. Every morning, he took the same bus, same route, same stops, same rhythm of doors opening and closing. He could not see the faces around him, but he knew the city by sound, the hush of early footsteps, the low murmur of tired voices, the rising and falling hum of engines in motion. For him, this was the shape of morning, routine, predictable, safe. Until one day, someone sat beside him. He noticed not by sight, but by presence, a shift in air, the nearness of warmth, and then her voice, clear, gentle, unhurried. "Good morning." 2 small words, but they opened something, and he answered. They talked easily, as though they had always known each other, about little things, the weather, the city, the way the bus leaned at a certain sharp corner. She asked if he needed help off at his stop. He said yes, and she guided him, with quiet steadiness, into the day. The next morning, she was there again, and the next, and the next. Days became weeks, morning after morning. They shared that half-hour ride, not out of obligation, but out of something softer. Friendship, the kind that grows not from grand gestures, but from showing up, from sitting beside someone and truly seeing them, even if sight isn't part of the story. They talked about everything: music, memories, the odd little quirks of the city that only daily travelers know. And one day, Without thinking too much, he said it aloud. I've never seen a sunset. He didn't mean it as sadness, it was just true. But she paused, and then, without hesitation, she began to describe one, not rushed, not careless, but slowly, like painting with words. She told him about the colors, how they softened from blue to gold, how pink touched the clouds like blush on a cheek, how the edges of the world glowed for just a moment before giving in to twilight. She told him about the quiet of it, how people slowed down, how windows reflected back the light like fragments of some larger beauty. And as he sat beside her, listening, he saw it, not with his eyes, but with something deeper. I could see it, he wrote later. Through her words, I could really see it. Their friendship lasted for years, morning after morning, sometimes filled with stories, sometimes just quiet, but always presence, always. A voice beside him that made the world larger than what his hands could touch. And this is what people remembered when he shared the story online. This is what echoed, that it takes so little to open a window into someone else's world. Not sight, not wealth, not perfection, just kindness. Just paying attention, just sitting beside a stranger and saying hello, and meaning it. The world is full of unseen sunsets, but sometimes all it takes is a voice to bring them to life, and a heart willing to listen. That is how worlds open. That is how strangers become friends. That is how we see, even without eyes, even in the quiet morning of an ordinary bus ride, because light lives wherever kindness does. It began, as many strange and beautiful things do, with a question. A simple question on a quiet corner of the internet. What's the most unusual baby name you've ever heard? And among the playful answers, among the real and the ridiculous, someone wrote a name no one expected. Streetlamp Lamousse. A name like no other. Impossible. Wonderful. And yet, they didn't stop there, because names, as the best stories remind us, are only the beginning. They wrote his life, not just the name, but the boy, the person. Streetlamp Lamousse, a child whose name turned heads and sparked smiles, but more than that, a child with quiet confidence, with joy in his step, with a kindness that reached out like sunlight across a playground. He was the sort of child who waved to everyone, teachers, janitors, kids sitting alone. In preschool, he introduced himself without hesitation. Hi, I'm Streetlamp. And somehow, the name fit. It glowed a little. It made people laugh, but never at him. Because laughter, when shared with love, binds people together. And Streetlamp understood that, even when he was small. Years passed. He grew tall, strong, not just in body, but in heart. He played sports, but was never the loudest on the field. Instead, he was the one who noticed when someone fell behind, the one who slowed down to lift them up. He became captain of his team, not because he demanded it, but because he lived it. Integrity is quiet that way. It doesn't need to shout, and in the story told online, this strange, sweet story born of imagination, Streetlamp Lamousse lived a life of uncommon grace. He studied, he worked, he helped. Wherever he went, he left things better than he found them. And in time, he became a leader, not of crowds, not of empires, but of people who wanted to build something gentler, something good. He was the friend who remembered birthdays, the neighbor who helped carry groceries, the stranger who saw someone struggling and stopped to ask, "Are you okay?" And though the story was fiction, every word a playful creation, it felt somehow deeply true. Because isn't that what we hope for? To live in such a way that our name, no matter how unusual, becomes known not for its sound, but for its meaning, for the kindness it carries, for the joy it leaves behind. The story of Streetlamp Lamousse ends with a line soft as a lullaby, a lesson wrapped in warmth. He became who he wanted to be by helping others become who they wanted to be. And maybe that is the best story of all, real or imagined, loud or quiet. It reminds us that names are only beginnings. It is choices, again and again, that tell the story of a life well lived, a life that glows like a street lamp in the dark, steady, simple, bright enough to help others find their way home. It began, as many curious things do, with a question, simple on the surface, almost silly. "You and a snail," someone wrote, "are both given immortality. You receive $1 million. But if the snail touches you, even once, you die. The snail always knows where you are. It is always moving toward you. What do you do?" And just like that, the internet paused, and then it dreamed. Thousands of people, strangers across the world, leaned into the question. They built plans, grand strategies, snail-proof fortresses, international travel routes, snail-seeking drones. Some imagined sealing the snail in a jar, burying it beneath mountains, sending it to space. Others were less concerned. They would live by the ocean, watching sunsets, always keeping one eye on the horizon, wondering, "Where is the snail now?" Some joked, some wondered, but slowly, quietly, something deeper emerged, because the snail, strange as it was, became a symbol, a quiet metaphor for something we all know but rarely name: mortality. The soft truth that something is always moving toward us. Time, change, the edge of life we cannot see, but know is there. The snail never runs, never falters. It moves slowly, but it moves always. And in that slowness, there is something patient something true, on Reddit and far beyond. The question changed. It was no longer about escaping forever. It was about how you would live knowing the snail was coming. Knowing, as we all know, that life is not endless even when we imagine it might be. And so the answers began to shift. People wrote not of running, but of building, of creating a life so beautiful, so full, so deeply lived, that when the snail arrived, when the end touched them, they could smile, not in defeat, but in peace. It's not about escaping the snail forever, one person wrote. It's about creating a life so meaningful that when the snail finally catches you, you can say it was worth it. And isn't that what we are all doing? Every morning we wake, every step we take, we live with things we cannot outrun. We live with endings we cannot predict. But we live anyway. We build gardens knowing winter will come. We write songs knowing one day they may be forgotten. We love, oh how we love, knowing every story must someday close its cover. The snail follows, quiet, certain, but life stretches ahead of us, shining with moments not yet lived, laughter not yet shared, hands not yet held, work not yet done. And so we do not fear the snail. We greet it when it comes, but not yet, not today. Today we wake. Today we build. Today we live as though a snail is coming, because it is. But not fast, not now. There is time for wonder. There is time for joy. There is time to make this life strange, fragile, beautiful, worth every single step, until the very last one. It began, as joy often does, with a question meant only for laughter. What food, someone asked online, would be absolutely disgusting if eaten over rice? A harmless question, a light thread, the sort of small, playful thing that drifts across the internet and disappears like steam from a kettle. But not this time, because someone, just one curious, brave soul, answered not with words, but with action. He decided, quietly, deliberately, to try them all. Every strange suggestion, every foolish idea, rice with everything. He cooked his rice, soft, steaming, plain, a blank canvas. And then he began. Skittles with rice, a rainbow of sugar melting against soft grains. 4 out of 10, he wrote. Not the worst, but strange. Peanut butter with rice, sticky, heavy. Messy, he noted, but edible. 6 out of 10, and then wilder things. Toothpaste with rice, sharp, cold, regretful. 1 out of 10. Do not recommend. But still, he pressed on, because by now people were watching, not out of mockery, but wonder, joy. Thousands of strangers gathered in the comments, cheering him on, suggesting new combinations. Cheese with rice, pickles with rice, honey with rice, steak with rice. Of course, 9 out of 10. Some things just belong. And then, ice with rice. He smiled, writing simply, "It just left me with rice. 10 out of 10. And in that moment, in that small, perfect line, something beautiful happened. Because this wasn't about rice anymore. Not really. It was about commitment, about showing up fully, even for something ridiculous. It was about joy for its own sake, not profit, not attention, but because it made people laugh, because it made the world just a little softer, a little stranger, a little kinder. And isn't that what we crave most of all? Not grand gestures, but someone willing to meet us where we are, to take a simple idea and carry it as far as it will go, for no reason except joy, except wonder, except connection. He never made fun of the task. He never tired of it. He tasted each bite with curiosity, with honesty. He updated his post again and again, like letters sent home from a silly adventure no one expected to matter. But it mattered, because thousands of strangers from every corner of the world gathered there not to argue, not to divide, but to laugh together about rice. Plain, ordinary, humble rice, becoming something extraordinary, because someone cared enough to keep going, because someone said, "Yes, I will try." And in the end, that is what stays with us. Not the toothpaste, not the pickles, but the small act of dedication. The reminder that life is richest when shared, even if it's ridiculous, especially if it's ridiculous. So the next time you hold a bowl of rice, or any simple thing, remember, sometimes joy is just trying everything. Sometimes joy is showing up fully for the silliest idea in the room and finding, to your surprise, that the world is full of people waiting to laugh right alongside you. 10 out of 10. Definitely would recommend. In a hospital wing where children fought battles far too big for their small hands, there was a friendship stronger than the walls that surrounded them. She was 7. He was 8. Both of them braver than anyone should need to be. They met between treatments, in the playroom, in the long hallways, in the quiet hours when nurses moved like shadows and machines hummed like distant bees. Together they laughed. They built forts out of blankets. They shared whispered secrets, trading them like treasure. In a world that often felt sharp and full of needles, they found something soft in each other. Best friends, undeniably, unbreakably. But time and illness move their own way. The boy's body grew tired. The nurses saw it, the doctors knew. And one day, her small voice broke the silence with a plan so simple and so full of love that no one could bear to tell her no. "I'm going to marry him," she said, "because he is my best friend." And in that moment, in that brave declaration, something shifted in the heart of the cancer ward. The nurses moved quietly, making calls. Flowers appeared, donated by people who heard the story and felt their hearts ache in the best possible way. The kitchen baked a cake. Small, but enough. A dress was found. Soft white fabric, just her size. A violin player from the staff offered to play. And the playroom, the little room where they had built castles from cardboard and battled imaginary dragons, became their wedding chapel. Simple. Perfect. On that day she walked toward him, flowers in her hair, bare feet on the tile floor, with all the courage a child can carry. The boy waited for her, his smile tired, but real. They exchanged ring pops. Bright candy circles slipped onto small fingers. They promised nothing but friendship, nothing but love as only children know how to give it, freely, without fear, without tomorrow. The staff stood quietly as witnesses. Parents wiped tears they could not hide. And for one soft hour, there was no cancer, no pain, no treatments, no machines, only two best friends on their perfect day. Afterwards, they watched movies together, side by side, as always. They ate cake and giggled softly as the sun went down outside the hospital windows. 3 days later, he was gone. The room was quieter, but the story, their story, remained. It lingered in the halls. It echoed in the hearts of every nurse, every doctor, every person who had stood in that playroom and witnessed the small, fierce beauty of their love. The nurse who shared the story wrote these words: "In that moment, there was no cancer, no pain, just two best friends and their perfect day. And maybe, in the end, this is what stays with us, not the battles lost, not the hard edges of grief, but the moments when love rises anyway, simple, unshaken, bright as flowers in a little girl's hair, sweet as candy rings on tiny hands. A reminder that even in the hardest places, love finds its way in. Soft, steady, unforgettable." It happened on an ordinary day, a grocery store. A woman standing at the register, counting carefully, watching the numbers rise on the small screen. Bread, milk, simple things. But sometimes simple things add up faster than hearts can bear. She reached into her wallet, counted again, realized with the sharp, familiar ache that she had come up short. Not by much, but enough. Enough to feel that quiet wave of embarrassment. Enough to whisper softly, "I'm sorry, I'll have to put something back." And that is when, from behind her, came a voice. Warm, steady. "Please let me help." She turned, and there he stood, a stranger, holding out a $20 bill, simple, uncomplicated, a gift offered without hesitation. At first, she resisted, as many of us do. Pride is quiet but heavy. "It's kind of you," she said, "but I couldn't." But the man smiled, softly, not out of pity, but out of something deeper. He held the bill as though it was something else entirely. "Please," he said, "accept this. It is my mother's flowers." And so he told her. His mother, in the hospital, had scolded him gently when he tried to bring her flowers. "Don't bring me flowers," she had told him. "Go help someone instead." And here he was, doing just that, carrying her love into the world, placing it where it was needed most, not in a vase, but in a moment, in a need he could quietly fill. The woman took the bill, not as charity, but as a gift rooted in another mother's love. A love that moved through hands and hearts and strangers like sunlight slipping through an open window. She left the store with her groceries, and tears gathering quietly in her eyes, not from shame, but from gratitude, from the weightless wonder of being seen, being helped, without strings, without expectation. A story told and passed on, like a flower pressed gently into her hand, and maybe this is how love travels. Not always in bouquets, not always in grand gestures, but in small moments, at a grocery store, between strangers, between hearts that understand that kindness is never lost. It moves, it lingers, it grows wherever it is planted. And long after the bread is eaten, long after the $20 is gone, the story remains. Soft, simple, unfolding quietly in the memory of a woman who walked home that day with a bag of groceries and something far sweeter, a mother's flowers, blooming exactly where they were needed most. She was an artist, traveling, carrying the tools of her craft, paints, brushes, colors, bottled like pieces of her heart. The airport was busy, as airports always are. Lines of travelers, the hush of announcements, the hum of movement. But rules are rules, and the rules said, no liquids, no paints, not here, not today. She stood there, watching her tools taken away, not with anger, but with quiet resignation. She understood. But still, it stung. Because paints to an artist are not just things. They are beginnings. They are stories waiting to be told. She boarded her flight, empty-handed. Colors left behind. The sky stretched wide outside her window, but her suitcase felt smaller without them. A week passed. Life moved on. Brushes could be replaced. Paints could be bought again. But what she didn't know, what she could never have expected, was that someone had noticed. Someone, on the other side of that moment, had seen not just a traveler, but a person. Someone had cared. The airport attendant, whose job was not beauty, not art, but order. He could have let it go. Most would have. But he did not. He saved the paints, set them aside. and then quietly he searched, found her return flight, not because he had to, but because kindness does not wait for permission. It simply acts. And so, a week later, there she was, returning, tired, expecting nothing, until she reached the baggage claim and saw him standing there, waiting, holding her paints like a small miracle, like a promise that not all lost things stay lost. He smiled, offering them back without ceremony, without expecting thanks. But she thanked him anyway, again and again, because some moments deserve to be spoken out loud. It wasn't about the paints. Not really. It was about the care, the quiet effort, the simple truth that strangers, ordinary people, sometimes choose to do something extraordinary just because they can. And isn't that its own kind of art? The art of noticing, the art of remembering, the art of saying, I saw what mattered to you, and I saved it, long after the colors are gone from their bottles, long after the brushes have worn down. This story will remain, a small bright stroke on the canvas of her life, proof that kindness, like paint, spreads, sometimes across paper, sometimes across hearts. So the next time you leave something behind, a dream, a hope, a small part of who you are, perhaps someone is waiting at life's quiet baggage claim, holding it for you, because not all lost things stay lost, and not all kindness goes unseen. Some of it waits, some of it returns, some of it finds its way back to you, exactly when you need it most. It was the kind of day that already felt heavy, the kind of day where nothing moves easily, where small things feel impossibly big. He had gone to the store, a simple errand, groceries, a few things for the house. But when he returned to his car, there it was, the sight that makes hearts sink, his keys, and his phone, locked inside, the doors shut, the windows closed, and there he stood, alone in a parking lot, with nothing but frustration and empty hands. He kicked the tire, not hard, just enough to say what words could not. Sometimes the smallest setbacks are what break us. But someone saw him, a teenager, riding by on a bicycle. Not in a hurry, just passing through. But he slowed. He noticed. "Hey," the boy said. "What's wrong?" There was kindness already in his voice. No judgment. Just a simple question. The man explained. Locked out, no phone, no key. His wife had a spare, but she was miles away with no way to reach him. The teen listened. Then, without pause, without hesitation, he offered something unexpected. "I can go get it," he said. "Where do you live?" 7 miles, the man told him. It might as well have been 70. But the boy just smiled, let him borrow his phone to call home, then got on his bike and pedaled away. No second thoughts, no promises of reward, just the quiet decision to help. And so the man waited, leaning on his car, staring down the long road, stunned. Because who does that? Who rides 7 miles for a stranger? An hour passed. The sun moved slowly across the sky, and then, in the distance, a small figure appeared. Tired legs, a determined face. A young cyclist returning with the spare key, with a gift far bigger than metal in his hand. The man was speechless, grateful. He offered money. He offered whatever he had. But the boy, grinning now, just shook his head. "Let's just say," he said lightly, "I needed the exercise." And like that, like a quiet hero without a name, he turned his bike and rode away. No ceremony, no glory, just kindness, pure and simple, the kind that stays with you. Years later, the man still remembered, not because of the key, not because of the locked car, but because of the way a stranger had seen him, had chosen to help, without expecting anything in return. We live in a world that can feel rushed, sharp, and distant. But sometimes, on a hard day in a quiet parking lot, someone shows up, on a bicycle, with time to spare, with a heart wide enough to make a difference, not because they have to, but because they can. And that is what stays, long after the car is unlocked, long after the road is empty again. Kindness moves like that, farther than 7 miles, farther than we can ever know. She was tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from one long day but from many, stacked like unwashed dishes in the sink of life. She was a Navy wife in Oregon, balancing it all, as military families quietly do, a full-time job, a toddler with boundless energy, a husband gone across the sea wearing his own weight of duty and distance. At night, when the child was finally asleep, there were moments of stillness, but they were not restful. They were heavy, empty plates, empty chairs, sometimes empty stomachs, because who has time to cook for 1.5 people when your heart feels only half there? Often she skipped meals, small things pushed aside. She told herself it didn't matter. It was just food, just exhaustion. It would pass. And then, one evening, a knock at the door, not expected, not hurried. She opened it, and there he stood, her elderly neighbor, a retired Navy chief, quiet eyes, strong hands, even with their age. On a tray he carried something humble, but made with care, a deep, hearty stew, chicken and vegetables, slowly cooked, patiently stirred. Beside it, warm bread, soft, golden. He smiled, his voice low. "I've noticed you're getting a little skinny." A gentle joke, but not unkind, not at all. Behind the words, there was understanding. Deep as the sea, they both knew well. Different generations, different battles, but the same thread of service, of sacrifice woven quietly through their lives. He didn't stay long, didn't expect thanks, just placed the tray in her hands and left her with more than food, left her with the reminder that she was not unseen, not alone, not forgotten behind closed doors and busy days. She sat down and ate, slowly, gratefully. It was, without question, the best meal she'd had in months, not because of fancy ingredients, not because of the recipe, but because someone had noticed, had cared enough to knock, to feed not just the body, but the heart grown tired from holding so much. In the days that followed, life was still hard. Her husband was still far away. The toddler still woke too early. The dishes still piled up. But something had changed. A small ember of comfort glowed quietly in her chest, knowing someone nearby understood, knowing kindness could show up even in the shape of stew and bread on an ordinary evening. Years later, she would remember it still, not because she needed the food, but because she needed the reminder that care takes many forms. A knock at the door, a plate offered without asking, a small rescue from loneliness, served warm, shared quietly, loved deeply. This is how neighbors become family. This is how we carry each other. One meal, one kindness, one heartful moment at a time. It was a small shop, quiet. The kind of place where every item has a story waiting to be chosen. A consignment store in Maryland. Racks of dresses hung in careful rows, lace and color, threads of other lives waiting for new beginnings. A grandmother stood there, her hands moving gently over the fabric. She had found it, the dress, the one she knew deep in her heart would light up her granddaughter's eyes. Perfect, soft blue, like the sky on a clear morning. But the price tag, small though it was, pressed hard against the edges of her budget. Times were tight. She stood for a moment, weighing dreams against dollars. Then quietly she approached the owner. "Could you hold it for me?" she asked, her voice kind but edged with hope. "I'll come back when I can afford it." She thought the moment would end there. A small delay, a promise made to herself. But someone had heard. Another woman, a stranger standing nearby. She stepped forward. "I'd like to buy it for you." Simple words, unexpected. The grandmother turned, astonished, grateful but unsure. Kindness like that, so large, so sudden, feels almost too big to hold. "Oh, I couldn't possibly," she began, but the woman smiled. Softly. "I need to do this," she said. And then the story unfolded. She had once been homeless for 3 years. She had lived with uncertainty, with empty hands, with hope stretched thin. And what had saved her again and again were strangers. People who saw her not as a burden, but as someone worth saving, worth feeding, worth kindness. Had it not been for the kindness of strangers, she said quietly, I would not have survived. And so, when life grew gentler, when she stood on steady ground again, she made herself a promise to repay it, to carry forward what had been given to her when she had nothing. The grandmother's eyes filled with tears, not from pity, but from wonder, because the dress, as beautiful as it was, had become something more. It had become a thread woven between two lives, a story of survival, a story of generosity. The woman bought the dress, no expectation, no name needed, only a simple request. May I have a hug? And in that small embrace, something holy passed between them. Not religion, not ceremony, but the sacredness of shared humanity. The grandmother left the shop carrying more than fabric. She carried a lesson, soft as silk, strong as love, that kindness does not begin with wealth, that generosity is not measured in money, it is measured in heart, in history, in the quiet promise we make to each other, to notice, to help, to hold someone's dream when their hands cannot quite reach it. And somewhere, a granddaughter would wear a sky blue dress, never knowing perhaps how it came to be hers, but wrapped in the warmth of a story that began long before her, and will, if we are lucky, go on long after. Kindness like that never goes out of fashion. It happened in a parking lot. Just pavement, just cars, just another hot afternoon in Florida. But stories, real stories, often begin in ordinary places. The doctor walked across the lot, his mind heavy, his heart heavier still. He had just left a hard conversation, a room filled with quiet sorrow. A man named Jimmy had sat across from him, patient, kind-eyed, strong in ways the body sometimes forgets to be. The diagnosis had been clear. Pancreatic cancer. The words sat like stones in the doctor's chest. He had said them gently. He had said them carefully. But no matter how softly you lay down the truth, some truths still hurt. Now, lost in his thoughts, the doctor caught sight of something unexpected. A stalled car. An elderly man standing beside it, puzzled, frustrated, alone. And there, half under the hood, hands dusty, knees bent, was Jimmy, his patient. The very man who had just been told his life might not be long. The doctor stopped, startled. Jimmy, what are you doing? Worry edged his voice. He knew how fragile Jimmy's body might be. But Jimmy, without missing a beat, turned his head, flashed a grin bright enough to cut through grief. My cancer didn't tell me not to help others, Doc. Simple words, said like it was the most ordinary truth in the world. And maybe it was. Maybe it always should have been. The doctor stood there watching as Jimmy worked, patient, steady. A few more moments passed, a twist of a tool, a spark of life. The car engine roared awake. The older man, grateful beyond words, shook Jimmy's hand, thanked him again and again, and drove away. And there Jimmy stood, dusty, smiling utterly himself, unmoved by pity, unmoved by limits. In Jimmy's world, kindness did not take sick days. It did not wait for perfect health. It did not ask for permission. It just was. Because helping, seeing others, reaching out, was not something his cancer could touch. It belonged to another part of him, the strongest part. The doctor would never forget. Not because Jimmy had fixed a car, but because Jimmy had refused to let life's hardest news close his hands. Kindness, he showed them all, is not a thing to be postponed. It does not wait for perfect days. It moves whenever and wherever it is needed most. Long after the parking lot grew empty, long after the dust had settled, that lesson remained. Quiet, steady, true. My cancer didn't tell me not to help. And really, what could be braver than that? What could be more human? To help anyway, to love anyway, to show up, even in the hardest moments, because life is not just about what happens to us. It is about what we choose to give away along the way. And Jimmy, with his hands beneath a car hood and his heart wide open, chose to give everything that mattered most. She was leaving everything familiar, her hometown, her small apartment, her well-worn routines. She was driving cross-country, headed toward a new job, a new life, a new beginning she had told herself she was ready for. But beginnings are often lonelier than we imagine. The goodbye hugs had been quick. Her car was packed. Boxes, bags, all the little pieces of who she had been. And as she was pulling away, engine humming, heart unsure, her neighbor had caught her just in time. An older woman, kind eyes, steady voice, who had lived next door her whole life. She pressed a small envelope into her hand. "Open it later," she had said with a knowing smile. "It's just something for the road." The woman thanked her, but in the rush of goodbye and the haze of nerves, she had tucked it away without much thought. The miles passed, town after town in the rearview mirror, music on the radio, mountains rising then falling away. But so did her money. Gas, meals, small tolls, unexpected expenses that pile up quietly until they are all you can think about. By the time she realized she didn't have enough to reach her destination, she was alone on a stretch of road far from anywhere that felt like home. She pulled over, parked beneath a wide, empty sky, and cried. Because leaving is hard, and arriving sometimes feels impossibly far away. And that is when, like a whisper from the past, she remembered the envelope, buried beneath maps and notebooks and receipts, her neighbor's handwriting soft and certain. She opened it with trembling hands, expecting perhaps a small note, a simple farewell. And there, fluttering out, was a crisp $100 bill. Enough to get her there. Enough to remind her she was not alone. Not really. She called later, from her new apartment, half unpacked, half exhausted, but full of something she had thought she'd lost along the way. Hope. Why did you do that? She asked, her voice thick with gratitude. Her neighbor laughed softly. I had a feeling, she said simply. That's all. I just had a feeling it would help. And that, perhaps more than anything, is what makes kindness feel like a miracle. Not grand, not loud, but quiet, instinctive. Given without needing to be asked. Given because someone looked at you and thought, one day this might matter. And it did. Long after the road had stretched empty, long after the tears, long after she thought she had run out of everything, kindness waited, in a sealed envelope, in a farewell given not to end something, but to carry her forward. Sometimes we do not know what people need until the world shows us. And sometimes we know without knowing. We give just in case. We help just in time. We love without asking why. Because kindness, real kindness, always finds its way home. Her name was Mrs. Garcia Esquivel, a teacher, a giver, the kind of person who pours her heart into small voices, into growing minds, into the quiet work of helping others become who they are meant to be. But even the strongest hearts can break. Even those who guide others sometimes need to be guided home themselves. She was 4 months pregnant. And then she wasn't. Loss arrived like a winter storm. Silent, unforgiving. A baby gone before she could be held. The ache no words could fill. The empty space where dreams had begun to bloom. Weeks passed. Days blurred. Grief does not leave quickly. And when it came time to return to her classroom, her second home, she was afraid. Afraid of the quiet. Afraid of the eyes watching. Afraid of how to stand where her heart felt too fragile to carry its own weight. She walked the familiar halls, her keys in hand, each step a small act of courage. And when she reached her classroom door, when she unlocked it, she gasped. She stopped, and the world shifted softly around her. There, covering her wall, were butterflies, hundreds of them, bright, beautiful, paper wings cut and folded by small hands, a garden of color waiting in the quiet, and on every butterfly, a message, a note, written by her students, present and past, the children she had taught, loved, lifted. Simple words, but full of life. Keep moving forward. Don't give up. We love you. Soft reminders from small voices that she was not alone. Not here. Not now. The tears came then. Not the sharp tears of sorrow, but the quiet ones that come when love finds you exactly where you need it most. In every corner of that room, wings, messages, hope. She stood there, held by their words, lifted by their care. Grief remained, because grief never truly leaves, but in its shadow grew something else, a cocoon of comfort, a reminder that even the smallest hands can build the strongest shelter. She stayed in that room. She taught again. She smiled again. Not because she had forgotten, but because they had remembered. Love left for her on a wall full of butterflies, a promise that we carry each other when the weight is too much to carry alone, that words matter, that presence heals, that hearts broken and brave can still rise, still teach, still love, because someone or many someones believed they could. Years will pass, the butterflies may fade, the paper may yellow, but the love will stay, soft, certain, fluttering gently in every lesson she teaches, in every child she meets. Proof that kindness grows wings and finds its way home again and again and again. In Louisville, Kentucky, in a classroom filled with crayons, lunchboxes, tiny shoes left slightly untied, two best friends made a plan. Jax and Reddy, 5 years old. Boundless energy, laughter that spilled down hallways, and hearts wide open. They were inseparable, partners in games, co-creators of make-believe worlds, and now conspirators, because they had thought of something brilliant, something funny, something so perfect they could hardly wait to see it unfold. "We want to get the same haircut," Jax told his mom, grinning from ear to ear, "so our teacher won't be able to tell us apart." She smiled. A small laugh caught in her throat. Because there, in that sweet, impossible logic, was something the world too often forgets. Reddy was black, Jax was white, but to them, that was nothing. Just color, just skin. Not a thing worth noticing. Not a thing that mattered in their 5-year-old world of race cars and recess and whispered plans over juice boxes. If their hair matched, then surely they would be identical. And so, they did it. Tiny chairs at the barber shop, big smiles in the mirror. Buzzed short, matching perfectly. Side by side, one heart, two heads full of joy. The next morning, they stood proudly at the entrance to their classroom. Two little boys, shaved heads gleaming like polished stones, eyes sparkling, waiting. Their teacher, wise enough to know a moment worth holding, played along. "Oh dear," she said, feigning confusion. "Now how will I ever tell you two apart?" Giggles erupted. Victory claimed. Two friends, delighted in their perfect prank, unbothered by things the world sometimes forgets to see clearly. Color, difference, division. To Jax and Reddy, there was only this: friendship, true, simple, real. Jax's mother shared the story. A small post on social media, thinking it might make someone smile. But what she had not expected was how far the story would travel. Because in a world hungry for reminders of goodness, this one small act shone bright. A haircut, a joke between friends, and a message louder than any speech. Friendship doesn't notice color. Not when hearts are this young. Not when love is this easy. And maybe the world needs more of that. More laughter over matching hair. More plans whispered in joy. More moments when skin is just skin. And what matters is how someone makes you feel. Safe. Seen. Loved. Years will pass. Hair will grow back. But perhaps, when they are older, Jax and Reddy will look at a photo. Two little boys side by side, buzzed heads and bright eyes, and remember, not just the prank, not just the day, but the feeling of being known, of being the same where it matters most, in the heart, in the laugh, in the friendship that sees only love. Jim and Laura Koch had been married for 26 years. 26 years of mornings shared, of coffee poured, of hands brushing in the kitchen, of ordinary days woven together until they were not ordinary at all, but precious. Their life together had been built not in grand gestures, but in small ones. A glance across the table, a shoulder leaned into when the world grew loud. They had already said the words, in sickness and in health. Years ago, standing at the altar, young, hopeful, believing them, but perhaps not knowing how fully they would be called upon, because life, as it often does, brought storms. Laura was diagnosed with breast cancer. The words fell heavy. Treatments began. Hospitals, appointments, sleepless nights, and then the surgery, a double mastectomy. Scars left where there had once been something else. Hair lost to the hard work of fighting. Strength drained. But not gone. Never gone. She returned home. Tender, fragile, but alive. And that was everything. Jim watched her, moving through the quiet house, changed, but still herself, still Laura, still the woman he loved. And in that moment, he knew what he wanted to do, not because he had to, not to fix anything, but to honor what they had always known. That love is not a thing of perfect days. It is a thing of standing close when life hurts, of saying, I choose you still. I choose you always. So he knelt in their living room, in front of their family, their daughters watching. He knelt down, as he had so many years before, and held out a new ring, simple, shining, a small circle to match the larger one they had always shared. He told her, softly but with no less weight than the first time, that he wanted to ask her again, to promise again, to love again, in sickness and in health. And Laura, bald, scarred, beautiful beyond words, said yes, yes, all over again. Their daughter captured the moment, a photo framed forever. A reminder that love is not weakened by time or trials. It is strengthened. It is tested. and found to be real. Their story traveled across news outlets, across hearts, a beacon of hope to anyone standing in a hard place and wondering, can love survive this? It can. It does. Not because life is easy, but because love, real love, gets down on one knee again, even after all the years, even after all the scars, and says, I choose you. I choose you still. I choose you always. Jim and Laura knew. The first proposal had begun their story, but the second, the second, that was where their story became something unbreakable. Not perfect, but true. And in the end, isn't that the most beautiful vow of all? In the vast city of Istanbul, amidst the rhythm of traffic, the swirl of conversation, and the noise of daily life, there lived a young man named Muharrem. He was deaf, and so he lived within a quiet world, carried gently, inside a loud one. Each day he moved through the city, with grace and resilience, communicating with gestures, with signs, with eyes that spoke, where mouths could not. But Istanbul, like many cities, was not built for silence. It was built for sound, for quick exchanges, for words that rush and don't always wait. Few people knew Muharrem's language, and so each conversation was work, a reaching out that was not always met, until one morning something changed. He stepped outside with his sister, a day like any other, until it wasn't. The grocer, the same one he passed each week, signed to him, not just a nod, not just a smile, sign language, a clear greeting. Hello. Good morning. Muharrem smiled, caught off guard. Then, a stranger on the street signed too. Good morning. The baker, the fruit vendor, even a small child, eyes wide with joy, signed, have a good day. And when a taxi pulled up, the driver turned and signed, where do you need to go? Muharrem blinked, confused, moved. Surely this wasn't real. But it was. Everywhere he turned, the world spoke, his language, his hands, his silence, and it spoke with joy. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that this was not coincidence. It was love, organized, a kindness carefully planned, a campaign brought together by Samsung. Yes, a company, but behind the brand, real people with real hearts. They had taught his neighbors, his community, basic signs, so that, for one day, Muharrem's world would not feel like a separate place, but one, woven fully into the rest. And when he learned this, when his sister led him to the center of the surprise, he cried not from sadness, but from fullness, because in that moment he felt it, what it would mean to be included, not just accepted, but understood, seen, heard, in the way that truly matters, not with ears, but with effort, with intention, with love. The video of that day traveled far, across oceans, into homes and hearts, because in watching it, we were reminded language is not just about sound, it is about connection. It is about choosing to step into someone else's world, even for a moment, even for a day, because that day can change a life. Muharram never asked for this, but it was given, a gift from many hands, saying in silence, you matter, you belong. We are learning to speak the way you do, and maybe that's all any of us need, to know that someone is willing to learn our language, even if it's just to say hello and mean it. Deborah knew about loss. It had already touched her life, once when she faced cancer herself, and then again, harder, sharper, when it took Hank, her husband, her companion, the voice in the kitchen, the hand at her back, the one who made her laugh even when life pressed down. His cancer came first, a diagnosis a month, and then he was gone. The house felt hollow. Rooms that once rang with jokes, with footsteps, with small, ordinary love, now sat quiet. But Deborah, like many left behind, found small ways to hold on. Photos, clothes folded but not put away, and one treasure more precious than she could have imagined. A voicemail, old, simple. Hank's voice crackling through the phone, complaining with good humor about traffic. That voice, his voice, not polished, not planned, just him, alive for 20 seconds in her hand. She listened often, in the quiet moments, in the lonely ones. A lifeline, a thread from here to wherever he was. But then, life, in its careless way, brought another loss. A new phone carrier, a switch. And just like that, the voicemail was gone, deleted, erased by machines that could never understand what they had taken. Deborah panicked, searched, called, but no one could help, until, in a moment of quiet hope, she wrote about it online. A small post, not expecting much, just saying softly that she had lost something that mattered. And then, kindness stirred. Unseen hands at her old phone company read her words. Strangers, employees who knew only what the job taught them, but who felt what their hearts told them. They began searching, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Hours of work, digging through systems, technical steps that most would never see, until at last they found it. Hank's voice, still there, still waiting. still his. They sent it back to her, this small, precious fragment of a life that had been full. When Deborah heard it again, clear, real, him, she wept, not from sadness alone, but from gratitude, from love made visible in the care of strangers who understood that sometimes a voicemail is not just a file. Sometimes it is a heartbeat, a whisper, a voice calling across time to say, I was here, I loved you. And isn't that what we all long for? To keep a piece of those we lose, to hold them close even when the world moves on. Deborah's story traveled because it spoke to something deep, something universal. Loss may come, but so does kindness, quiet, unexpected, stepping in to save what matters most, sometimes with grand gestures, sometimes with a voicemail, a voice brought home by hands that understood the smallest things can mean everything. In New Jersey, in a home like so many others, a family was learning what it means to live with fear wrapped around love. The Roscoe family, parents to little Talia, a baby girl, bright-eyed, fragile, with a future uncertain, because Talia, not yet even 2 years old, needed what no child should need, a liver transplant. Her life was a countdown, the kind of waiting that curls around every moment, a shadow on the walls of the nursery, a hush in the sound of lullabies. But love, as it often does, kept moving forward. They hired a babysitter, Kirsten Miles, 22 years old, young, bright, hired to watch over Talia, to rock her, to read her stories, to feed her small hands crumbling pieces of crackers. But sometimes, life places people exactly where they need to be, even before anyone understands why. Kirsten learned about Talia's need, the transplant, the clock, and where others might have hesitated, where most would have offered prayers, meals, words of support, Kirsten offered herself, without pause, without fanfare. I'll do it, she said. I'll donate part of my liver. Not because it was easy. It wasn't. Months of tests followed. Blood drawn, scans taken, doctors asking hard questions. Was she healthy enough? Was she ready? Was she sure? Yes. Always yes. And in January 2017, this young woman, who had only cared for Talia for 3 short weeks, stepped into an operating room. She gave what she could never get back, a piece of herself, so that a small girl could have a life still unwritten. The surgeries were long, fragile, hopeful. And when it was over, when Talia woke with a future newly stitched into her body, the Roscoe family knew they could never thank Kirsten enough. Not in words, not in time, not in a lifetime of gratitude, but they told her anyway, softly, honestly. We could thank you every day for the rest of our lives, and it wouldn't be enough. Kirsten, modest as the truest heroes are, simply smiled, said anyone would do the same. But we know not everyone would. Not everyone does. She did, and that is what matters. That is what love looks like when it arrives quietly and stays. not because it has to, but because it chooses to. Today, Talia grows. She plays, she laughs, her small life expanding into days her parents once feared would never come. And forever, in the story of her life, there is Kirsten. Not just a babysitter, but family, written into their hearts not by blood, but by sacrifice, by love without conditions, by the kind of giving that turns strangers into something far more lasting. A second chance, a forever bond, proof that sometimes the greatest gifts are not wrapped in ribbons, but carried quietly inside us and given away when love asks us to be brave. Marley was 9 years old, but already stronger than most people ever need to be. She had been fighting a rare cancer, alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, a long, hard word for something that had turned her whole world upside down. She had lost so much energy, time, hair. Long before she lost it, she knew it would happen. The doctors had told her. The mirror had shown her. The soft strands, once brushed and braided and tied with bright ribbons, were gone. The chemo had taken them. And now, as she stood on the edge of going back to school, what frightened her most was not cancer. It was being different, being the only bald kid in a sea of ponytails, braids, baseball caps. But Marley, brave as she was, did not have to face this alone, because in her corner stood Cameron, her best friend, small in size, mighty in heart. Cameron knew what she had to do, not because someone told her, but because friendship sometimes whispers so clearly that you can't help but listen. She shaved her head, not for attention, not for praise, but for Marley, so she wouldn't be the only bald kid in class, so her friend could walk the halls without lowering her eyes. And then something beautiful happened. The story spread. First one teacher, then another, then students, then parents. The whole school heard about Marley, heard about Cameron, and they answered in the best way people can, with action, with courage, with love, made visible. Meridian Elementary organized an event. Be bold, be brave, go bald. A name full of heart, a name full of truth. On the day of the event, 80 students lined up, shiny heads waiting to be born anew. Teachers, principals, even parents, all ready to give up their hair. For Marley, for every kid's fighting a battle too big for their age. And when it was over, when the clippers fell silent, there stood Marley, no longer alone, surrounded by dozens of bald heads, shining like small suns in the hallway light. She smiled, wide and real. I didn't think that many people would shave their heads, she said quietly, but I feel good. about not being the only bald one. And beyond hair, beyond appearance, they raised over $25,000 for childhood cancer research, money that would help others. Hope woven into every dollar, but perhaps the truest gift that day was not the money. It was the feeling that Marley carried home, that she was loved, that she was not different. She was surrounded, upheld, seen, and sometimes hair is just hair. But love stays in laughter, in bravery, in the simple, beautiful truth that no one should have to face hard things alone, not when friends are willing to stand beside you, not when a school will stand bold to say, "We are with you, we are for you, be bold, be brave, be you." It began simply with a pair of scissors, with hands that knew how to shape what was tangled, what was tired, what the world often passed by. Josh Coombs was a hairstylist, a barber, a man of his craft. But his heart moved him further than the walls of any shop. In 2015, on the streets of London, Josh stepped outside with a different kind of purpose. He didn't wait for customers. He didn't wait for appointments. He found them, sitting on sidewalks, leaning in doorways, carrying their stories in their faces, their hair, their tired eyes, the homeless, the unseen, the passed-by. He knelt beside them on the cold ground, not as a stranger, not as a savior, but as a human being who wanted to listen, who wanted to help in the way he knew best. "I have scissors," he must have said again and again. "Would you like a haircut?" No charge, no catch, just care, right there on the sidewalk. Scissors, a cape, a mirror held up to faces that perhaps hadn't seen their own reflection in far too long. He cut away the months of matted hair. He trimmed beards weathered by wind and rain. But more than that, he asked questions, listened to answers, held stories with gentle hands. And when the hair fell away, what was left wasn't just a new look. It was a reminder that they mattered, that they were still here, that someone still saw them. Photos captured the transformations, before and after. But not just the surface. It was never only about the surface. Josh's movement grew. Do something for nothing. A small phrase, a simple invitation. Give what you have. Offer what you know. Not for fame, not for praise, but because we belong to each other. And kindness, real kindness, is free. Josh teamed up with others. A veterinarian friend offering care to the pets of those without homes. Doctors, artists, musicians. People from everywhere stepping forward with what they could give. A sandwich, a song, a moment of stillness in a restless world. The streets remained loud, hard, unforgiving. But in small pockets, on corners bathed in late afternoon light, There was quiet. There was connection. There was Josh, scissors moving through hair like someone restoring not just appearance, but dignity. As he once said, "I wanted to break the taboo around homelessness and show how a small act can connect us." And he did, over and over again. Because a haircut, in his hands, was not just a haircut. It was a gesture, a whisper, a reminder, you are still you, still worthy, still here, and someone is glad to see you. Someone is willing to kneel beside you and do something small. That turns out to be everything. It was the Rio Olympics, 2016. The world was watching, as it always does. Eyes fixed on the lanes, the clock, the finish line. The women's 5,000-meter heat had begun. A blur of strength, grace, and determination. Among them, Abby D'Agostino from the United States, Nikki Hamblin from New Zealand. Two runners, two stories, two dreams carried on their shoulders like quiet prayers. But then, life happened. The unexpected, the unthinkable. Nikki stumbled, a sudden sharp fall onto the hard track. And behind her, Abby, with no time to swerve, tripped, tumbled. Both runners sprawled out on the unforgiving surface. For most, this would have been the end. The kind of fall that crushes Olympic hopes beneath dust and disappointment. But not for them. Not that day. Abby, her instinct faster than thought, reached for Nikki, not with frustration, not with blame, but with care. With kindness woven into every fiber of who she was. "Get up," she urged, her voice steady, her heart sure. "We have to finish this." Nikki, shaken, rose with Abby's help, but soon after, Abby realized her own pain. A torn ACL, an injury that would make every remaining step a test of courage. And now, it was Nikki's turn. She slowed. She waited. She became what Abby had been for her, a friend, a steady presence, a voice saying, "You can do this." Together they moved forward, not for the medal, not for glory, but for each other, step by aching step. Far behind the pack, far from the race they had trained for, but right in the center of something larger, the true Olympic spirit. When they reached the finish line, there was no roar of victory, no gold, no records broken, but there was an embrace, soft, strong, the kind of hug that says, "We were strangers, but not anymore." Olympic officials watched, and they knew. This was a moment worth honoring. Both women were granted a rare exemption, allowed to advance to the final round. Not because of time, but because of heart. Because of what the Olympics were always meant to be. Later, Abby and Nikki received the International Fair Play Award. But even before that, they had won something better, a sisterhood. Forged not in victory, but in vulnerability, in kindness shown when no one would have blamed them for walking away. And their story traveled, far beyond Rio, far beyond the track, because we all need reminders like this, that life stumbles, that we fall, but that what matters most is how we rise and who we reach for along the way. Abby and Nikki showed us the finish line is not always what we thought it would be, but love, compassion, connection. Those are the medals that never tarnish, that never fade. 2 runners fell, 2 hearts rose, and the world stood still to watch kindness run its greatest race. It was a morning like any other. Perth, Australia. A platform humming with the quiet shuffle of daily life. People waiting, phones in hands, coffee cups lifted. Minds already moving ahead to work, to errands, to whatever the day would bring. And then, a moment, the kind no one expects. A man boarding the train, a simple step, the same step he had likely taken hundreds of times before. But this time, something went wrong. His foot slipped, his legs slid deep into the narrow gap between the train and the platform's edge. Wedged, trapped. Pain surged. His voice rose, a shout for help. And in that moment, time shifted. Everything else fell away. Phones lowered, coffee forgotten. Dozens of people turned, not away, but toward him. A wave of response, immediate, instinctive. Strangers stepping forward without question, without hesitation. They knelt beside him, hands reaching, words of comfort offered. But the leg, it would not budge. The train, too solid, too heavy. And then someone saw the answer, not in machines, not in waiting, but in people, in muscle, in unity. We can move it, someone said. And the idea, so impossible, caught fire. Dozens lined up along the side of the train, men in business suits, women with bags slung over their shoulders, transit workers, teenagers, elders, all of them, hands pressed against cold metal, hearts pressed against the same purpose. Ready? And they pushed. Together, the train, so massive, so unyielding, shifted just enough, just far enough to open space. And the man, shaken, aching, frightened, pulled free, lifted back into the arms of people he had never met, people who had become his rescuers, his neighbors, his community, built not of location, but of shared humanity. And then, as quickly as it began, the moment passed. He was safe. The crowd breathed again. Some patted his shoulder, some smiled, and then, without fanfare, they boarded the next train, moving forward, back to their day, back to their quiet lives. But the world had seen them. The CCTV footage traveled fast. A video of strangers becoming heroes, people becoming stronger than steel. Not because of force, but because of unity. A transit official said later, "This was humanity at its best." And it was, because sometimes the world surprises us, not with tragedy, not with sorrow, but with goodness, with hands that lift, with strangers who lean in, with people who show us we were never meant to stand alone, not in moments of crisis, not in moments of fear. We are made for this, for leaning together, for holding each other up, for moving the unmovable when someone calls out, "Help me," and the world, without hesitation, answers, "We will." The story began, as kindness often does, with no plan, no expectation, just a moment. A mother, her young daughter, walking down an ordinary street, until they saw her. A teenage girl sitting on the sidewalk, crying, lost in a way that went beyond directions. Her face streaked with tears, her spirit bruised by something sharp and unkind. They stopped. Of course they stopped. The mother knelt beside her, learned her name, learned her story, bullied, humiliated. Classmates had thrown food at her, words sharper than the hard pavement beneath her. Without thinking twice, the mother helped her up. Not because she had to, but because the world should feel safer when someone reaches for you. She drove the girl home, gave her a phone number. "Call me any time," she said. And then, as life often does, the moment passed. Days became weeks. Years moved quietly forward. The girl never called. The mother forgot, not out of indifference, but because kindness, when given freely, expects nothing in return. The little daughter grew up into her own story, into her own life, until one day an emergency came, a hospital visit. The mother waited, heart pounding, time slow, until a nurse walked in. Soft steps, a gentle voice, and then a pause. The nurse looked at her, really looked, then smiled. "I know you," the nurse said. The mother blinked, uncertain, but the nurse's eyes shone with certainty. Years had passed, but some things, some faces, some moments are never truly forgotten. "I've been wanting to say thank you," the nurse whispered. And then the story unfolded. The nurse, the girl from the sidewalk, had grown, had healed, had become someone who lifts others, because once someone had lifted her. The mother sat in quiet awe, tears welling, not from sadness, but from wonder, from the way life circles back sometimes, soft as a memory but powerful enough to leave you breathless. The girl she once comforted, now comforting her daughter. A kindness that had travelled unseen through years, through sorrow, through strength, and returned. Not because anyone owed it, but because love given freely never really disappears. It waits, it weaves, it finds its way home. They embraced, older now, stronger now, bound not by blood, but by a moment long ago when a mother stopped on a sidewalk and showed someone you are not alone. And perhaps that is what matters most in this world. Not grand gestures, not loud praise, but the quiet truth that kindness, once planted, grows. in places we may never see, in hearts we may never meet again, until one day we do. And we stand there, grateful, astonished, held by the quiet beauty of kindness come full circle. Proof that love never truly leaves us. It lingers, it waits, and when we need it most, it returns. It was the busy season, Christmas coming soon. A craft store, bright with lights, crowded with customers, the shelves lined with things meant for giving, for decorating, for joy. But behind the counter, working a long shift, was Snail, a young cashier. Tired, soft-voiced from a cold she couldn't quite shake, running low on energy, but not on kindness. Because sometimes the strongest hearts are not the loudest. They are the ones still smiling when the day feels far too long. She rang up an older couple, two strangers, easygoing, joking about the next stop on their afternoon errands. Cracker Barrel, they said, a favorite place. And somewhere between scanning candles and folding tissue paper, the husband asked her, offhand, casual, "What's your favorite meal there?" And she laughed, softly, maybe more honest than she realized. "Meatloaf," she said with a small grin. "Green beans, sweet tea, simple, comfort food. Exactly what a tired soul might crave on a cold December day." They smiled, finished their purchase, wished her well and left. Snail didn't think much of it. There were customers waiting. There was a shift to finish. The register beeped quietly as she carried on. But kindness, real kindness, does not rush. It lingers. It remembers. And 20 minutes later, there they were, the same couple, walking back through the sliding glass doors of her busy store, but this time carrying something different. A takeout bag, warm in their hands, still fragrant from the kitchen of a little restaurant down the road. Inside, meatloaf, green beans, sweet tea. Exactly what she had named. Exactly what she had half-jokingly dreamed of. They handed it to her. No expectation. No need for thanks. "Merry Christmas," the woman whispered. And she hugged Snail just for a moment before they turned and slipped away. Not waiting for praise, not needing it. Just leaving love exactly where it was needed most. And there, at the register, behind all the gift wrap and holiday rush, Snail cried, not from sadness, but from being seen, being remembered in a world that moves too fast for small things. A meal, a moment, a memory she would carry long after the season ended. Later, she wrote, it wasn't just about the food, though it filled her. Body, yes, but heart too. It was about being reminded that goodness still lives in quiet corners, that people notice, that strangers care. And sometimes, this is what the holidays really are, not the biggest gifts, not the brightest lights, but the soft kindness of seeing someone and doing something small that turns out to be everything. Meatloaf, green beans, sweet tea, and love wrapped in a takeout bag, left quietly beautifully where it was needed most. They were children once, Tony Beckett and Mary Dunstan. Growing up in England, brother and sister, the kind who bickered one minute and defended each other the next. They fought like cats and dogs, as Mary would later laugh, but they were close. Always close. Bound not just by blood, but by 1,000 small memories woven through childhood days. They grew older. Life moved on, as life always does. And in 1979, Mary left. Australia was calling. A new adventure, a new life half a world away. They promised to write, to stay in touch. And they did, for a while. But time is long, distances stretch. Letters stop. Years slip past like the tide, quiet and sure, until 45 years had gone, nearly half a century. Both of them, now in their 70s, widowed, changed, but still carrying the small ache of something missing. Family, the voice of someone who knew them before the world grew so complicated. And Mary, far away in Australia, decided it was time. She saved her money, booked the flight, carried in her heart all the memories and all the hope that perhaps her brother still waited on the other side of the world. And Tony, living in England still, waited, hoped, wondered what it would feel like to see her again, to bridge all those years with nothing but a hug. And then, at the airport, it happened. They saw each other, two faces lined with age, but lit with something untouched by time. Recognition, love, home. They fell into each other's arms, not caring who saw. Tears quiet, laughter louder still. We fought like cats and dogs as kids, Mary smiled, but we were very close. And now, close again. For the next week, they did what siblings do best. They told stories. They filled the long empty spaces between them. They walked past their old neighborhood. The streets changed, the houses unfamiliar, but still, somewhere in the cracks, they could see it. Two children running down the lane, shouting, laughing together. Time had moved on, but their bond had waited, quietly, faithfully. And now, they were whole again. News of their reunion spread across England, across Australia, across the world. A reminder that it is never too late, never too far, never too lost, to reach out, to go home, to say, I have missed you. Tony and Mary knew. The years apart could not erase what mattered most. Family, memory, love that stretches across oceans, across decades, and finds its way back when it is needed most. They left the airport that day, older, perhaps slower, but lighter, together again, and in their hearts, a truth the world sometimes forgets. It is never too late to go home, never too late to call someone you love, never too late to feel whole again. Her name is Ryan King. 10 years old, bright eyes, quick smile, a child of Kentucky, born with spina bifida, a wheelchair her constant companion. But her spirit, free, wide as the fields, tall as the sky. At Tully Elementary School, a field trip was planned. A day at Bernheim Forest, trails winding, fossil beds waiting, paths stretching across rock and water. But Ryan, she would not be able to go. The land was rough, uneven, impossible for wheels. Her mother had begun to plan something else, a day still special, but away from her classmates, away from the adventure. But there was a teacher, Mr. Jim Freeman, who heard, who cared, who believed that sometimes the simplest answer is the bravest. "I'll carry her," he said, as if it were nothing, as if it were everything. And so the day of the field trip arrived. Mr. Freeman brought with him not just a sturdy backpack carrier, but a heart ready to do what love asks of us. To lift, to include, to walk the extra mile for someone who deserves to go just as far as anyone else. He strapped Ryan in. She laughed, up high, safe, ready. And off they went. Over rocky paths, across small streams, up hills and down again. The class moved together, and this time so did Ryan. Pictures tell the story best. Ryan, grinning, her arms loose around Mr. Freeman's shoulders, looking out over the forest, over the world. On top of the world, her mother said later, not left behind, not watching from afar, but there, in it, belonging, because one man had said yes. One man had bent down low, only to lift her higher than she'd ever been. The photos travelled far. The story travelled further, across towns, across hearts. Because we all need to believe that this is possible, that kindness still lives in quiet places, in the back of a classroom, on a forest trail, in the steady footsteps of a teacher carrying a child, not because he had to, but because he could. After miles walked, with tired legs and a heart full, Mr. Freeman said simply, "I'm happy to help her make memories." But what he did was more than memory. It was message. It was promise. It was proof that inclusion is not just a plan, it is action. It is doing the hard thing with joy, so that no child has to stay behind, so that no dream has to sit waiting at the edge of the trail. Ryan's story is a field trip story, but really, it is bigger than that. It is about seeing someone fully and walking with them, even if it takes your whole strength, even if it takes your whole heart. Piggyback rides end when the trail does, but love like that carries forever. This happened in Arkansas, in a small school, in a quiet hallway where two friends had walked together for years. Their names were Tanner Wilson and Brandon Qualls. Two boys, one friendship. But every day Tanner watched. He watched Brandon pushing his manual wheelchair, arm over arm, slow, hard, tiring. Brandon has limited mobility, And those long school days, those crowded hallways, they didn't wait for anyone. By the end of the day, Brandon was exhausted. Tanner saw it, noticed it, not once, not twice, but every single day. And in his heart he decided, I'm going to help. Not with big words, not with promises, but with action and patience. Tanner got a part-time job after school, working in a car shop, getting grease on his hands, saving almost every dollar, quietly, for 2 years. While the world went on around him, Tanner worked toward one thing, one dream, a motorized wheelchair for his friend. Not because anyone asked him, not because anyone expected him, but because love, true love, does not wait to be told what to do. And then, in 2019, it happened, in front of their whole school. Tanner rolled out a shiny red and black electric wheelchair. The moment is caught on video, Brandon gasping, hands flying to his face. Disbelief, joy so big it fills the whole room. Students cheered, teachers clapped, because here was a gift that could not be bought with money alone, only with time, sacrifice, friendship worn smooth by years. Another student had even added flame decals, bright streaks of orange and gold along the sides. Because this wasn't just transportation, this was freedom. Brandon transferred into his new chair, placed his hands on the joystick, spun around the classroom with the biggest grin you've ever seen. And Tanner, he stood nearby, smiling, a little shy, a little bashful. Because he didn't want praise, he didn't want a headline. He just wanted his friend to move with ease, to glide down the hallway, to reach the end of the day without being tired. To help him like he deserves, Tanner said. Simple words, but the world heard them. The story spread far beyond their school, far beyond Arkansas, because people needed to know that in a world often too loud, too fast, too busy, there are still people like Tanner, still hearts that see quiet struggles, still hands that save for years, just to lift a friend a little higher, just to make the path smoother. Brandon's life changed that day. 2 wheels carrying him faster, further, freer. But really, both of them carried something more. A friendship made of effort, made of watching, made of showing up again and again. As one commenter wrote, "In a world full of noise, be a Tanner." And I think, be a Brandon too. Be the friend who receives joy with arms wide open, who says thank you with every smile. 2 wheels, 1 friendship, moving forward together. They were born together, 2 tiny girls, Marilia and Andrea, twin sisters, born in 1933, 2 hearts starting life side by side. But life, as it sometimes does, had other plans. Their parents were lost too soon, gone before little girls could even understand what forever meant. And so, the twins were separated, placed in different homes, raised by different hands, different voices singing them to sleep, different stories woven into their growing years. And in time, memories faded, the world moved on, and each of them, Marilia and Andrea, grew up believing the other might be gone, lost to the shadows of childhood, gone to a world they could not reach. Decades passed, years folded one atop another, soft as letters never sent, long as lonely birthdays, 80 years. And then, a whisper of hope from a place neither of them expected. A simple gift of modern life. A DNA ancestry test. A small sample sent away. And when the results returned, the world changed again. For there it was, her name, her twin, alive, breathing, waiting. Andrea, now 90, in Las Vegas. Marilius, now 90, in Denver. Two lives that had run parallel for 8 long decades, finally about to cross again. Andrea didn't wait. She booked a flight, carried with her not just luggage, but hope. And when they met, face to face, sister to sister, for the first time since they were children, they embraced, held each other like the world had stopped turning, like no time had passed at all. They wept and laughed, both amazed at the sight of the other's face, older now, but familiar. The same smile, the same spark in the eyes, the same mischief dancing just beneath the surface. 81 years is too long, Andrea whispered. And it was. But it was over now. The waiting, the wondering, together again. For days they talked, shared photographs, filled in the long blank pages between them. And then, more wonder still. In their conversations they discovered what neither had known. 3 more siblings from their original family were still alive, scattered, but breathing the same air. Plans were made for hugs waiting 8 decades to happen, for a family pulled apart by life, brought back by love and a little science. Marilia sat with her sister beside her, the one she thought was lost forever, and said simply, "I feel like the happiest person in the world." And who could argue? Because theirs was not just a reunion, it was a miracle. Proof that time is long, but love is longer still. Proof that family is never truly gone. Sometimes lost, sometimes far away, but waiting, always waiting, for the right moment to come home. Even if it takes a lifetime, even if it takes 81 years. They were born together, and now at last they could finish this beautiful life side by side. Thank you for listening to these feel-good stories for you to fall asleep to. We hope, if you're still listening, that you have a renewed sense of hope for humanity. From Piggyback ride to using sign language to help someone feel less alone, and even long-lost siblings finding each other. These stories bring feel-good vibes to our listeners. Please like and subscribe so we can continue to create videos for you to listen to. Lay back and enjoy the soothing sounds of sleep music and rain to help you to fall and stay asleep.